Okay, so we are recording this meeting, and good morning and welcome to this class on Animal Farm. All right, now the previous class we had talked about the historical background of this particular novel, the events that led to it, and the events that are mentioned in this particular novel. Okay, some of these things is something that we had talked about. Now there is, a very important preface that Orwell had written. Okay, it was the preface to his Ukrainian edition. Okay, the Ukrainian translation of the Animal Farm. So you can imagine the languages into which this has been translated, and Ukrainian is particularly significant because it is contiguous to the current Russia. Okay, yes. So in the preface to the Ukrainian edition, what he mentions, the translation, I'm sorry, what he mentions is something very important. Okay. Uh, See, he says that I have never visited Russia, and my knowledge of it consists only of what can be learned by reading books and newspapers. Even if I had the power, I would not wish to interfere in Soviet domestic affairs. I would not condemn Stalin and his associates merely for their barbaric and undemocratic methods. It is quite possible that even with the best intentions, they could not have acted otherwise under the conditions prevailing there. Okay, so he says that this was how Russia was at that point of time. So I don't really blame anybody for the things that happened in Russia at that point of time. But then he continues. But on the other hand, it was of the utmost importance to me that people in Western Europe should see the Soviet regime for what it really was. Since 1930, I have seen little evidence that the USSR was progressing towards anything that one could truly call socialism. Yeah. On the contrary, I was struck by clear signs of its transformation into a hierarchical society in which the rulers have no more reason to give up their power than any other ruling class. Moreover, the workers and intelligentsia in a country like England cannot understand that the USSR of today is altogether different from what it was in 1917. It is partly that they do not want to understand it. And partly that being accustomed to comparative freedom and moderation in public life, totalitarianism is completely incomprehensible to them. Okay, yeah, and then he tries to tell us that since his main idea of writing this particular novel was to show the way that the way that Russia had changed, okay, over the years, and the way that this entire ideology of communism had undergone a sea change. Okay, so that is what he's trying to say. All right, so he wants people to see things as they are. It is very important for him to be able to deconstruct or completely, let's say, reveal the realities of the harmful effects of totalitarian ideology. Understand? So he does not want people to just believe in a utopian ideal. Rather, he wants them to understand the realities of totalitarian propaganda. Understand? Yes. So he continues to say, and so for the past 10 years, I have been convinced that the destruction of the Soviet myth was essential if we wanted a revival of the socialist movement. See, earlier also I told you that, such were the ways, or the pace at which events were unfolding, that somehow Russia had come to be synonymous with the Soviet movement. Understand that everything that the Communist Party and the leaders of the Communist Party in Russia were doing became synonymous with the Soviet movement, and there was this valorization, this making the Russians the ideal of liberty, of participatory politics, all of these things. Okay, and these were the ideas that were inspiring movements in places like Spain and England and so on. Understand? So what he wanted to do was to write a story that could kind of bust this myth. See, he continues. On my return from Spain, I told you he had taken part in the Spanish Civil War. I thought of exposing the Soviet myth in a story that could be easily understood by almost anyone, and which could be easily translated into other languages. Okay, so see, this is his ideal. Understand? Yeah. And he did not start writing it out until 1943. And then, when he did begin writing, he began including events that were, unfolding around him at the same time, simultaneously. Okay. So this novel was very contemporary at that point of time also, in terms of describing the current events that were unfolding around the world. But at the same time, this novel is contemporary or relevant even today on account of the way in which it describes the processes of totalitarianism. It describes the processes by which, successive regimes all over the world use ideology, use propaganda, use media, and use rhetoric in order to gain support and to maintain that illusion that they are the saviors of ordinary people. Okay, but what essentially all of these things do is they take the power vested in the people away from them. Okay, and much of this does not happen through force. Much of this happens because people willingly give it up. Understand? Because they cannot cope with the anxieties of this sort of responsibility. See, if I tell you, just hand it over to me, I will take care of it all. You don't have to worry about anything. I am here for your welfare. You will believe it because these are very convenient words. Understand? Yes. I could take examples from contemporary film, like what happens in the first part of Bahubali, okay, where Tamanna is a wonderful warrior. She can fight people in front of her. She can instinctively, ward off people behind her. But the minute she meets this man, she's completely in love with him. And next minute, she is captured by all kinds of people. And, then she says she has a mission. And he says, give me that mission. I will take care of everything. And she just gives him. Okay, so what happened to the ideology that she was fighting for all that while? Understand? So this is it. It becomes very convenient for people to just give it up. Okay, and when they have an ideology that is ready and at hand, that's what they do. Understand? Yes. So, like I said, yeah, he's he's struck by the sight of a little boy, 10 years old or so, who is whipping a cart horse. Okay, and then Orwell thinks, if only this horse knew how strong it is, if only animals knew how strong they are or how powerful they are, human beings would have absolutely no control over them. Okay, just as the rich people exploit the poor. Understand? So then he began to analyze Marxist theory from the point of view of the animals. Understand? So he began to incorporate all of these elements, and that is how he came up with this fable or this allegory. Okay, now he says that he doesn't want to comment on his work. Okay, because if the work doesn't speak for itself, then it is obviously a failure. But he would like to talk about two things. Okay, that though various episodes are taken from the actual history of the Russian Revolution, I'm quoting him here, they are dealt with schematically and their chronological order is changed. So don't kind of use this to understand a chronological documentation of Russian history. Okay, don't do that. Okay, they kind of mix and match everything up. The second point has been missed by most critics, possibly because I did not emphasize it sufficiently. A lot of readers may end with the idea that, towards the end of the novel, the animals and the human beings, the pigs and the human beings are fighting with each other. But actually, he does not want to say that. That is not what he wanted to say. Okay. What he was trying to, say is that things really don't change, that nature doesn't really change. Understand? And he was trying to give us an insider's perspective of what was the Tehran Conference of 1943. Okay, I will come to the Tehran Conference of 1943. That is when you will understand all this. Okay, yes. So this is what he says in the preface to the Ukrainian translation. Okay. Now, shall we go through chapter by chapter of this thing?
Yes,
Summary. Okay. There are 10 chapters. Okay. Now, though there are 10 chapters, I hope you know that it's a very slim book. Okay. So let's look at the list of characters. All right. Once we put that in place, then we can go on to the story per se, and then analyze it from various perspectives. So you have Major, okay, who is a horse, okay, sorry, who is an old boar, BOAR. Please understand that that is a spelling of boar, okay, not BORE. Okay, he is an old boar, a huge pig, okay, who's who makes I suppose is the father of this entire movement, and he's the one who sets these ideologies in motion and devises the kind of let's say the principles, the tenets that govern these people. Okay, that govern this entire movement. Then you have Snowball, who is a stand-in for Trotsky, Leon Trotsky. Again, we talked about him in the previous class, and he's also a boar, who is essentially the ideologue of the party, IDEALOGUE, the ideologue of the party. Okay, and in a sense of the term, he could be called, I suppose, one of the people who are most ideologically attuned to the ideas that were put forward by Major. Then you have Napoleon, okay, who is again a representative, or he is the objective correlative of Stalin, okay, and it is Napoleon and Snowball who emerge as the successors to Major, okay, and but the way that Napoleon goes through this entire process of talking things over and influencing people, he is absolutely unparalleled. Okay, so if Snowball is the brains of the movement, then Napoleon is the action part of it. Okay, then you have Squealer, which, as the name suggests, he's a porker pig who kind of serves to be Napoleon's mouthpiece. Point one. Then he is a great how do I say, media manager. Okay, he is a man, oh sorry, he is a pig who is able to manipulate all rhetoric, all conversations to the advantage of the administration. Okay, so he is their spokesperson, he is their enforcer, he is all of these things. Okay, then you have Boxer, who is an incredibly strong but an incredibly unimaginative and very, very innocent horse, whose main idea is to serve the rebellion, is to serve the leaders, okay, who ardently believes in the ideology that Napoleon is right. Then you have Molly, who is a very fancy horse. Okay, she's very vain. She likes ribbons. She likes being fed sugar cubes. Okay, and she does not want to be part of the rebellion, basically because it harms her vanity. Understand? So she is one of those, I suppose, pampered rich people who leave the country at the first sign of trouble. Okay, who are not part of its, who do not believe in supporting the peasants. Then you have Clover, who is again a horse. Okay, she's very maternal. She's very protective of Boxer as well, and she is a person who is able to discern things. Okay, who analyzes matters, who questions. Okay, the administration. In that sense of the term, she's a lot like the intelligentsia. Then you have Benjamin, okay, who is a very cynical donkey, okay, and whose basic motto is donkeys live for a very long time, live for a long time. Understand? When he says that, you understand that, he's a man. I mean, he's a donkey that has seen everything, that has, seen the cyclical movements of history. See, people always, time is not a linear concept. Time is cyclical. So what has happened once can very well happen again, particularly if it involves human beings, because human nature is essentially a stereotype. Understand? That is, power, and power, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Okay, and that, these talks about liberation, these talks about a better future, a nicer tomorrow, all of these things have been said time and time again to people without, it really getting anywhere. Because at the end, all of these revolutions that try to work for the greater good have all ended up rather abysmally. Now you have Moses, who's a raven. Okay, now he represents religion. Okay, the role of religion in the state. Okay, now Marx has very famously remarked that religion is the opiate of the masses. Okay, religion is what the generally people take comfort in, and he mesmerizes the animals, particularly Molly, with talks about a wonderful paradisical place called Sugar Candy Mountain. Okay, and nobody's seen this mountain. It's almost like the promise of paradise. Okay, but people like to believe in it. Okay, they want to believe that there is such a place called Sugar Candy Mountain, because again, the future, the present is so bleak that the future, even if it cannot be seen, even if it is not real, is something that people can hold on to. Okay, then you have Bluebell, Jessie, and Pincher. Okay, they are three dogs, and there are they have 9 puppies between them, and all of these are taken away by Napoleon, and they are raised to be his guard dogs or his enforcer dogs. Okay, this, and this is a an allegory of the KGB, or the secret police, that was put into place by Stalin in order to root out or sniff out all his enemies and eliminate all opposition. Understand? And you have the humans, who are Mr. Jones, who was the farmer who owned Manor Farm, where this entire story takes place. Okay, and he is represented as a rather degenerate, debauched individual who did not care about his farm, who did not care about his animals. Okay, who just wanted to maintain absolute and total control over his land. Okay, then Mrs. Jones, again, not a very strong figure. She just flees the place when the animals attack the farm. Then you have Mr. Whymper. Okay, WHYMPER, who is a solicitor or a lawyer who is hired by Napoleon in order to negotiate deals with the neighboring farms and so on. Then you have Farmer Pilkington and Farmer Frederick. Okay, the people who own the nearby farms, and the people who are also ambitious and who want to acquire Manor Farm, but in a way, they end up losing some of their own farmland, and also entering into deals and negotiations with Napoleon. Understand? And these two people, that is Pilkington and Frederick, are again, they stand in for Roosevelt and Churchill. Okay, the two people that Stalin meets at the Tehran conference in Iran in 1943 in order to counter the threat that is coming in from Germany. Okay, yeah, so we'll come to that. Okay, so now is this clear to all of you, the list of characters? We have everybody covered? Everyone is okay.
It's clear.
All right. So now, first chapter. Okay. See, in the first chapter, what happens is that the animals have been not been fed by Mr. Jones, who is in a drunken stupor, and they're all rather hungry. And then Major, okay, old major. He calls for a meeting of all the animals and he talks to them. Okay, he tells them that that life is so hard because it is these people who are controlling us. Okay, and that animals should be left in charge of their own destinies. That if that were the case, then no animal would be hungry. And he even teaches them a song called "The Beasts of England." It is a rousing tune, something that comes between Clementine and La Cucaracha. Okay, it's a very interesting kind of a tune, and it's a very interesting theme that he talks about. It is a very promising idea that these animals are singing about, understand? And then they kind of get into the mood and they have this great singing session. And then Jones thinks that all the animals are panicking because a fox has gotten into the farm, so he fires a gun and all these animals disperse in a great hurry. Okay, so in this very first chapter, we kind of get a glimpse of the basic nature of most of the characters. Okay, you have Jones, who comes across as rather irresponsible, rather complacent, and extremely controlling. Okay, he's complacent because it's his farm, he owns it, he's entitled to it, he has he has all the rights over it. See, as a stand-in for the monarchy. Okay, which believed in the idea of the divine right. That is, God has given you the right to rule over all of these people, so they're all your subjects. Okay, so that is there. Then you have a major who is committed, who has given so much of thought to what he wants to say, and he genuinely believes in this idea of a better tomorrow that can come about. He unfolds his ideology, the 7 commandments, okay, which again are a reflection of the 10 commandments of the Bible. Okay, and he gives them an anthem, something to believe in, something to relate to. All of these things are there. Okay, now this is again, major is again a reference to Lenin. Okay, yes. Then you have you're shown Clover, you meet with Benjamin, you meet with Boxer. Okay, you meet with all of these people and you get this idea about the kind of people or the kind of animals that they are and the sort of values that they represent, understand? And here Major's speech kind of reflects the speech that was given by Thomas Hobbes. Okay, where he says that men who are not controlled, when you do not place natural checks on human beings, they tend to become dictators. They tend to believe in an absolute kind of rule. Okay, so that should not be there. There has to be very strong controls or checks, regulations placed on people in power. See, because obviously power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Thomas Hobbes didn't say that. I'm telling. Okay, so you have all of that, and Major says that you should remove human beings from this entire equation. Okay, if human beings are removed from the farm, from our scheme of things, then the world will be a much better place. Ironically, Major, who has thought about the nature of human beings, who has thought about the sort of world that it should be, who has thought about how they should conduct themselves, who has thought about the ideology that they should follow, the principles that they should believe in, did not account for the fact that animals are also equally capable of this sort of evil, this sort of totalitarianism, if they are given a chance. See, probably this has come about because Major has never seen a situation where animals are in charge. Understand? Okay. Yes, and he rouses the animals to a feverish pitch of emotion when he talks about the way that human beings just kill animals for their pleasure. They just kill for food and then they waste that food. That animals are forced to give up all their resources for the greater comfort of human beings, and ultimately they all are they come under the cruel knife. And all of these things kind of make the animals determined to not put up with this kind of exploitation anymore. Understand? Yes. So they are also shown told that they have these symbols of oppression. They have the rings around their noses. They have a leash. They have all of these elements of control that enable human beings to control them. Okay, so he says all of these things are symbols of our slavery. Okay, and we have to get rid of that. So he uses language. He uses rhetoric. He uses his connect with the animals. He talks to them in the language that they understand. He talks to them from the point of view of their experiences, which makes all of this very relatable. Understand? Yes. So, and in the process, he promises something of a better tomorrow. All of these things fill the animals with a great deal of hope. Understand? Yes. Now, what happens is, Major passes away. Now, when he passes away, it becomes a time when the animals start to exercise their the ideas that Major had spoken about. Okay, so they start doing that, and then what happens is that this marks the beginning of a new era in manor farm. Okay, so what happens is that pigs are considered to be the most intelligent of the lot, particularly I suppose also because sorry, particularly also I suppose because there is this impression that Major has also given. Okay, so looking at Major, they decide that somebody like Major, okay, somebody who belongs to the same species as Major would be equally intelligent. So the pigs are given the right to talk about what they should be doing next. They are made the leaders of the rebellion. Understand? Yes. So then the pigs talk about the principles of animalism. Okay, which is what they kind of condense all that Major had talked about. Okay, yes. So so though Molly wants to know what will happen to my ribbons, and though the raven Moses talks about sugar candy mountain, it is ultimately the principles of animalism that appeal to the people. Understand? Now, so here again, you should understand that this is the way he talks about the way that Russians embrace this whole idea of socialism and also embrace the ideas or the principles that were put forward by the Communist Party. Okay, yes. Now, what happens is that, they rise up in rebellion against Farmer Jones. They drive him and his wife and all the farmhands out of the farm. Okay, and they rename Manor Farm as Animal Farm. Understand? And they decide to convert Farmer Jones's house into a museum, possibly, to inspire other animals and to show them what can be possible, to talk about a better future. Okay, yes. And also what happens is that you have Snowball, who is the general who engineers this entire movement. Okay, and he's shown to be a great tactician. Okay, he's the one who kind of does this very judicious placement of animals and leads the battle, which they win. It's called the Battle of the Cowshed. Okay, and then Napoleon also emerges as a very viable leader. He is a man who is he is a pig who is used to getting his way, and he manages to do so by not really addressing any topic directly. Okay, yes. Now, here you have two ideological opposites. You have Snowball on one hand, you have Napoleon on the other hand, and they are also, opposite in terms of their behavior, because Snowball believes in this, utopian ideal of a wonderful place, a place where, everybody is happy, where things happen in an ideal fashion. Okay, whereas in the case of Napoleon, he's not too fussy about that. He wants his ideas to be the most prominent. He wants to ensure that the power rests with him. Okay, so Napoleon emerges as a rather power-hungry individual, while Snowball seems to genuinely want to work for the betterment of the people. Understand? Yes. Now, so in that sense of the term, you can almost think that Snowball has a sugar candy mountain of his own, concept. Okay, not with religion, but with a place where there is something ideal, where everybody is equally happy, where everybody has equal rights, where everybody is considered equally valuable. Okay, but if that were the case, then the absolutism, the totalitarianism of Napoleon will not work. This is why Sugar Candy Mountain appeals to Snowball, but it does not appeal to Napoleon. Understand? Yeah. Right. So the animals are victorious over Jones. They take over the entire farm. They eat as much as they want. They loll around as much as they want. They want to have a life of great happiness and pleasure, and all of that is there. As I told you earlier, they renamed Manor Farm to Animal Farm. Okay, and somehow all of this, they feel that by changing the name, anything or something is going to be different. All of these things point to the initial innocence and optimism which comes built in with every revolution or every coup. COUP. Understand? There is the sense of optimism, that comes in whenever a rebellion is successful, whenever people manage to take power, they're always very happy about it. Right. Now, what happens is in the last chapter, this is the second chapter, in the last segment of this second chapter, there is this, the cows give 5 buckets of milk and so on. But, instead of giving it all to the animals, what Napoleon does is he just very creatively stands in front of all that milk and then sends off all the animals to do various kinds of jobs. So almost, all of this milk goes to the pigs itself. Understand? So see, all animals are equal. One of the most important tenets of animalism is all animals are equal. Okay, so even at the very outset of the rebellion, and right from the point where the rebellion starts to succeed and has succeeded, that particular principle has already been violated. Understand? When Napoleon stands as the leader and sends all the other animals off to do their work. Understand? Yes. Then you have the next chapter, okay, where the animals really struggle to use the tools that that have been designed for human use, but they manage to do that, and they complete the harvest in half the time that it took the farmers and the farm hands to complete. Okay, and the animals find that the apples and the milk are being mixed in the food of the pigs and not in their own food. And when they question that, Squealer, who is this very clever dodger of questions, what he does is that he tells them, see, the pigs are thinking very hard for your benefit, so that requires a lot of brain and effort, and so we need more nutrition. That is a problem, and surely you don't want Jones back. See, the minute that particular statement is made, you don't want Jones back, all the animals are like, we will give up all our rights. Please eat all the food that is there. Understand? So see, what propaganda does is, it not only tries to promote its own self, okay, or the government that it is speaking for, or the people that it is speaking for, it also preys, P-R-E-Y-S, preys on the fear that other human beings nurse. Okay, it takes up the darkest fears, it takes up memories of times gone by, and it uses the very same thing in order to gain its, get its way. That is what it does. So, the minute he says, surely you don't want Jones back, all the animals willingly give up everything that actually should be coming to them by right. See, whenever, we hear that, governments have done this or governments are doing this for the people, we should understand that there's nothing to be grateful about. This is what the government is supposed to do. This is what we elected them for. Understand? You never elect a government saying that, oh, let their families prosper. You never do that. You do it because you want them to do something for you. Understand? So, but the minute they say, surely you don't want that old terrible time to come back, what happens is that it's almost like they are doing you a favor. Okay, by being in power. The very use of the term ruling the country, being in power, taking charge, see, all of these things point to an imbalance in the way that, public offices operate, public offices, work. Okay, so this is why, it is said that language is one of the most important weapons for any movement. Understand? So here also you can see, look at the way that Major spoke to the people, the language he used. Okay, look at the principles of animalism. Okay, no, four legs good, two legs bad, because people like Boxer, who represent the hardworking peasantry, are unable to understand all of these things. What happens is that many of the principles of animalism are condensed, and it is just one sentence now, which is four legs good, two legs bad. Understand? Becomes easier to be understood. And see, this also points to this idea that very succinct slogans, okay, will stick in the minds of the people. Understand? Like in the American elections a long time ago, one of the candidates, Dwight Eisenhower, okay, his slogan for people went around with bumper stickers and everything. Any idea what it was? No? It's a general knowledge question.
No, ma'am.
I like Ike. That's it. I like Ike. Okay. Then of course you have Yes We Can. Whose was that? Nobody from India. Obama. Are you all there?
Yes, ma'am, we are here. We are here, ma'am.
Okay, half people are here. Yes, Rima, what is it that... No, don't think of what you are going to think of. I have a small feeling I know what you're thinking of. When we stop recording, you can think of it, okay? Okay. So anyway, so in the meanwhile, Snowball has been going around, kind of thinking of, we'll see later on if, you and I are thinking of the same thing that you were supposed to be thinking of. See, this guessing what people are thinking about is also one of those tendencies that totalitarian regimes have, where they say that we know what is good for you, we know what is going on in your mind, and we will do exactly that. But they go and do the exact opposite of that. Anyway, so Snowball creates a flag for the animals. He tries to create educational societies or circles for the animals, so as to tell them better about the basic principles of the revolution. He tries to have separate societies for various animals, like the Clean Tail League for the cows and so on. But all of these things kind of fail because somehow the animals are not able to take that level of intellectualism. See, again, it points to the way that people are unable to grasp the finer points of of many ideologies. Understand? And where gradually things unfold in such a way that things that the entire rebellion will be, or the entire movement gets concentrated in just a few words and just an overall idea of it. Understand? Like what happens with the case of communism, okay, where finally it just became control in the hands of the people. That is it. Understand? But the basic idea of informing people, of telling them, and making them understand about what it is that they have control of, is lost. Understand? So this means that ultimately power again slides back and rests in the hands of the few, just as it did before the rebellion. Understand? See, this is why Benjamin the donkey says donkeys live for a very long time. None of you have ever seen a dead donkey. Okay, which means that he knows that this is exactly how the entire movement is going to come about. Understand? Yes. Now, Napoleon, on the other hand, also believes in education, but his education is of a totally different sort. Understand? He takes away the 9 puppies, presumably to train them and to educate them and so on. But when they come back as horrific dogs of war. Okay, who enforce the fear that Napoleon wishes to instill in the minds of the people. Okay, the kind of people that he wants, the dissidents that he wants to keep in check. Understand? Yes. Now, Snowball also comes up with this idea that a windmill must be built, which can generate energy and which can help reduce the working time of the people. Okay, but Napoleon does not really like that, because if people are allowed to sit back and think for some time, then they might develop alternate ideas, they might develop counter revolutions and so on. So he is not much in favor of that. In fact, he tries to discredit the windmill at every opportunity that he gets. Now, you then move on to the next chapter, which is the news of the rebellion is spread to other farms through use of the birds. Okay, the pigeons and so on carry the news of this rebellion to other farms in the hope that the movement can spread and that there will be a greater control for animals over their own destinies. Understand? Yes. So they also, that is Napoleon and Snowball, also create a number of useless ideas, such as order of animal hero first class. Understand? Then he such things which are decorative and meaningless at the same time. Okay. Now both Frederick and Pilkington are shown as being extremely greedy individuals, but they are not above striking a deal with Jones in order to help him ostensibly get the farm back, so that they can go on and capture the farm from him later on. Understand? Yes. So in October, there is again a kind of indication of the October Revolution. Jones and a set of farm hands come to Animal Farm, and what happens is that the windmill is destroyed in the battle. It is called the Battle of the Cowshed. The windmill is destroyed in the battle, but with great effort, the farm hands and the farmer is driven away. One farm hand loses his life. Boxer is extremely sad at the loss of this life, but he's told that these things are necessary evils. Okay, and now gradually what happens is that in fact Squealer comes and tells all these people that they have managed to do a great thing today. Okay, they have managed to uh, beat back, okay, these totalitarian forces. They have managed to win a great victory because they have got back the land on which the enemy was standing a few moments ago. And the Boxer tells him, so that means we got back what we actually already had, which means that we didn't get anything at all. Okay, which is true. See, they had taken Manor Farm. Okay, they made it Animal Farm. Then the farmers people came and tried to take it back from them, and these people drove them back. So did they get more land? No. Understand? They just got back what they already had. Okay, but the way it is being talked about, the way people are extolling it, it is like they won a huge and great victory. Oh, meanwhile, Snowball gets driven out of the farm. Okay, and then Napoleon comes and says, "Let us finish the windmill. It will be a good idea." Okay, and then the entire idea of the windmill, the entire idea of what it can do for the animals, all of this is shown to be Napoleon's idea. Okay, see, this is the way that propaganda and ideology work hand in hand when both are nefarious. Understand? Yes. So, as I told you, the windmill gets destroyed, and then the animals decide to reconstruct the windmill, and Boxer works hard. He works overtime and tries to do whatever he can in order to sustain this particular rebellion. Meanwhile, the animals are getting lesser and lesser food, and the pigs are getting more and more food. Okay, and this also brings the onset of winter, and what happens is Molly, the horse, the fancy horse, is working very little. And then Clover discovers that she is being lured away from the farm by a farmhand who offers her sugar cubes. Understand? And then one day Molly just disappears completely, and then she's reported to be standing outside a pub. I suppose she's a cart horse now. She's carriage horse. She is standing outside a pub with ribbons in her mane, and possibly munching on sugar cubes. But she is happy. Understand? So it is not a positive picture that they're painting of Molly. It is just, a reference to all the wealthy people who left Russia at the first sign of trouble and decided to continue their lifestyle elsewhere in other parts of Europe and America. Understand? Anyway, so now, as I told you earlier, the windmill, is being built, and Snowball is driven out of the farm. Okay, now Snowball is also very, very severely discredited by by Napoleon. Okay, and for this he uses Squealer. Okay, so then what happens is everything that goes wrong on the farm is blamed on Snowball. Okay, if there is some form of a disaster, if the crops have not been growing very well, if something has gone missing, they keep saying Snowball had come and he had done this. Then they also accuse Snowball of having colluded with Farmer Jones right from the beginning, of having colluded with the nearby neighboring farms, Frederick and Pilkington, from the beginning. So, Snowball is made into this bogeyman figure, okay, who will do all that he can to undermine the rebellion. Okay, so again, this is the way that Stalin ultimately discredited or tried to discredit Leon Trotsky and drove him out of the country, and finally drove him out of the continent, and then had him assassinated. Okay, yes. Now, in the next chapter, what happens is, as I told you, the animals are working harder than ever. Okay, and then, Napoleon announces that Animal Farm will be trading or conducting business with other farms. Okay, and that, he will be selling them timber and so on. And he'll be selling them timber and so on. And what he does is that, unless, they do all these things, the farm will be in extremely dire straits. And he says, surely, if we can't sustain ourselves, then that is going to be a problem, because Jones might come back. Understand? Yes. So what happens is that the animals who had begun as equal upon the farm then start to be hierarchically classified into workers and leaders. Okay, that is the workers being the other animals and the leaders being the pigs. Okay. Now, as I told you, a storm comes in and knocks down the windmill, and again Snowball is blamed for that also, and they start the rebuilding process again. That Boxer is extremely enthusiastic about. Understand? Yes. So gradually very subtle changes start to be made in the 7 commandments, okay, or the principles of animalism. Like, for example, it's written, no animal shall sleep on a bed. Okay, but then the animals catch sight of the pig sleeping on the bed. So very, very, very slyly the slogan is changed to no animal shall sleep on a bed with sheets. Okay, so then people are like, that was not how it was. Okay, but the pigs convince them, particularly Squealer convinces them, like people like Clover, that actually that was how it was. You don't remember reading it. Okay, and the animals are convinced. Understand? See, this points not just to the cunning of those in power, it also points to the gullibility of those who are being ruled by those in power. Understand? Yes. So you have this whole process of subtly changing these principles of animalism. That is how history is rewritten. Okay, see, history, it always belongs to the victor. Okay, he who wins will get to write history. Okay, not just create history, but write history. See, writing history is as important as creating history. Okay, because even if you haven't done anything, if you write history, it is created. Okay, so these mythical battles, the stories of power, the great deeds done by kings and other people, we don't know. Yes, exactly. As Rimash pointed out, history is a set of lies that are agreed upon. Hmm. So, you know, all of these conquests, all of these stories, all of these, tales of grandeur, you don't know if that really happened or if somebody was just writing it for the fun of it, and then later on, decades, centuries later, the book was discovered and considered to be true. Okay, there have been instances of rulers cutting out their enemies' names from the texts of history. Okay, uh, names have been expunged. Okay, in ancient Egypt, it was a sign of great insult. As well as it was a way of condemning someone to hell by having their name struck off from the pyramid, or from the name struck off from these memorials that were built in honor of their death. Okay, so this doesn't mean, say, people who are dead are dead. Okay, what is hell? Hell is a situation where you are completely forgotten, where nobody remembers who you are, where nobody knows you, nobody takes your name. Understand? That is how you are actually mortal. Okay, the body is just a shell. Okay, what you do, how you're remembered as, who you are, all of these things will be determined by the people who remember you, who write about you, who think about you. Okay. So that is what makes you truly, truly immortal. Understand? That is a principle that we see here also. So when you rewrite history, okay, you are giving yourself a very important place. You are becoming the hero of your own story. Understand? Yes. So, the animals are again gradually starving. Okay, and then all the human beings are also looking to seize control of animal farm. But what Napoleon does is he uses Mr. Wimper, the solicitor, in order to spread stories about the great plenty at Animal Farm, about how everybody is so prosperous, about how all the animals have enough to eat, and so on. Understand? Yes. Now, what happens is that, next Napoleon puts out an order that all hens must give up their eggs. Okay, which the hens refuse, and they set up a demonstration. They try to protest, and 3 hens are killed in the process. Okay, and all the other hens quietly go back to their work. Now, this is a reference to some of the sailors, a part of the Soviet army, who mount a rebellion, and then that is mercilessly quashed by the forces of Stalin. And it was a rather dark time in Russian naval history also. Okay, yes. Now, all the animals are told that, it's actually Snowball who is visiting the farm and who is kind of, sabotaging all their efforts. That Snowball is in, association with all the other farmers and so on. And in order to help the people tied over this very difficult situation, what, Napoleon does is he organizes a great cultural theatrical production. See, last time I told you that in Russia, not only were they propagating all these people's movements, they had given a great deal of importance to theater, to cultural productions, to these grand ballets and opera and so on. Understand? Because they were very insistent that there has to be a great deal of cultural education also that must take place. Understand? Yes. Now, as I told you earlier, those people who seem to be a threat to Napoleon's systems of administration are immediately, put down. Okay, you have animals being forced to confess, and then those animals are killed. Now, again, that is a violation of the principles of animalism, because it's written there that no animal shall kill another animal. But even that is kind of changed. Then the Beasts of England song, that was the anthem of the revolution, that is displaced, and it is replaced with Stalin, it seems, with Napoleon's own poet, another pig by the name of Minimus. Okay, look at the name also, Minimus. Minimus's poem, which kind of is a song in praise of Napoleon. Okay, it has lines like animal farm, never through me shall you come to harm. Okay, And see, look at the use of the word me. Okay, through me. And he tries to show Napoleon as the savior of the farm, of the animals. That he is the one who will lead them onto a life of great prosperity. But who's the one doing all the work? These animals are the ones doing all the work. Understand? So the idea, see, the cult of a leader is established there. Okay, just as the cult of Stalin had been established in Russia of that particular point of time. Understand? He became a huge leader, larger than life. Okay, yes. Now, the following year, again, there is more work to be done on this windmill. There is less food for the animals. Okay, then, you have. Squealer, who gives all of these statistics, okay, saying that, see, this much of food has been produced, we got this much to eat, it is such a wonderful time, it is great prosperity, and so on. Okay, and the animals wonder when that happened, but because it is being quoted as statistics, they believe it. Okay, they feel that, oh, maybe that is true, we just did not notice it. Okay, we are in chapter 8 at this point in time. Okay, and the animals are starving. Okay, but there is nothing that they can do about it. Now, Napoleon has complete and absolute control over the farm, but this makes him even more paranoid. Okay, this makes him more of an egomaniac. Understand? And he tries to live a life of isolation. Okay, he eats only from the dinner service plates of Farmer Jones. He sleeps in a bed all by himself in a room. He has his food being tasted by another pig because he's scared of being poisoned. Okay, then he gets the poem that Minimus had written. He gets it inscribed on the wall. Okay, and he, when he sells the timber to the other farmers, he gets a lot of money, and that he arranges on the table in front of him, and he's lying down there, and he makes all the animals walk by in a slow procession. Understand? So this is a sign of their power, I mean his power, as well as it is a way of showing people, the other animals, the kind of business acumen and smartness that he is capable of. Okay, because the power of a leader lies in the amount of the prosperity, the economic prosperity that he can bring in, as well as displays of military might. Understand? All these displays of our sophisticated weapons, of our army, navy, air forces. Okay, all of these things on our national festival days. Why do we do that? Why do we have military parades? What is it meant to do? The military know that they are there. They know that they can march fast. Anything. That is their whole job, marching. Much of their job. So why are they marching in front of these leaders? They are not marching in front of the leaders. They are marching in front of you and me. They are marching in front of the other nations of the world. Understand? To show how strong they are, how organized they are, how much of powers rest with them. Understand? They want to show off the latest machinery and weaponry so that their enemies will be wary of them and think before they attack. Understand? That is the whole point. It's a show. Okay. So anyway, so now what happens also is that this man Napoleon, pig Napoleon releases pigeons. Okay, with this slogans like "Death to Frederick," "Death to Pilkington," just to strike fear in the minds of these farmers, and also kind of tell the animals of Animal Farm that news of their rebellion has inspired other people. Okay, I mean other animals in other farms. Okay, yes. So what he does through this is that he establishes the validity of his regime. Okay, at the same time he kind of makes it imperative that the other countries seek him out as an ally, which is what happened also, because both England and America came to Russia and talked about being allies in the war against Germany. Understand? Yes. So again, the windmill is named Napoleon Mill. Okay, so he establishes his cult over there. Okay, the cult of his personality is imposed when he calls it Napoleon Mill. It's like building up your own statues. Okay, yeah. Now, again, as I told you, those statistics come about. Sorry. Yes, the pigs start getting better and better food. They get mash in their milk, in their food. Okay, and the windmill is destroyed once again. Okay, through a kind of a joint attack. Okay, and what happens is that in that big battle also the animals emerge victorious, but that is a very very sparse victory. They hardly gained anything. Okay, now when farmer Frederick uh, imposes an attack on the farm, on Animal Farm, they managed to beat him back. They managed to gain that very, very valuable ground, which was theirs to begin with. Okay. Now, again, the windmill gets destroyed. The windmill seems to be the, what do you call, casualty in all of these things. Okay. Now, they decide to build the windmill again. So in October, there was a storm which knocked the windmill down. They built it up back again. Now, Farmer Frederick, comes and attacks the animal farm, and the windmill is destroyed. Then they start to build it again. At that point of time, it was called the Napoleon Mill, and now it is being built again. And Boxer works harder than ever. Okay, because he feels that he is going to retire very soon. So even before that, he wants to ensure that this particular windmill is built. But his strength gives out. Okay, he's too ill, and the squealer gives it out that a veterinarian is coming and getting him, and they'll take him away to make him feel better. But when the van comes, it is a glue maker's van. They use animal fat and so on. He's called a knacker, Knacker, knacker. Okay, and what happens is that Clover manages to read the side of the van, and she's like, they're taking him to be killed, they're taking him to be slaughtered, and she tells a Boxer to kick his way out of the van. But Boxer, who was once a massively strong horse, cannot find it in him to do this. Understand? And he's just lying there helpless, the horror of his situation sinking into him. But Squealer comes and tells Clover and other animals that no, the vet had purchased this van from the knacker, but he didn't get enough time to paint the side of it. That is all. Eh? And the animals think, oh, maybe that is true. And they want to believe him for that. Understand? Yes. So, now Squealer again comes and tells them that we are facing a great crisis. There is a great deal of starvation and so on. So what we have to do is we have to readjust our rations. Understand? Look at that. Readjusting your ration, it is actually meaning that, you're going to get less food. But when they put a positive spin on it, it becomes something really great. Okay? Like when we say that, we are going to help you enhance your capabilities by giving you 3 more tests. Understand? In effect, what are you doing? You are writing 3 tests. But are you thinking of it as writing 3 tests? No. You are thinking of it as capacity enhancement, capability building. Okay. This is how, you put a positive spin on it and make people actually want to do it. Understand? Yes. So now, Squealer announces that Boxer is no more, that in his last moments he was given exemplary care, that Napoleon had arranged for everything, and all the animals are full of gratitude, and they become very emotional hearing about the last moments of Boxer's death. Okay, and all these words like admirable and expensive and care and love, all of these things were used in the kind of conversation that Squealer has with the animals with regard to Boxer's death. And then on the same night, that night, all the pigs get drunk and go off to sleep. Understand? Which means that they are not very different from what Jones used to be. Maybe Jones was a good, compassionate farmer in the beginning, and life made him like this. We don't know anything about Jones, okay, because this is being told from the point of view of the animals. Okay, now, Napoleon wakes up and finds that, he is drunk too much, and he feels that, he might be poisoned or something, and he says drinking alcohol is banned for all animals. Then after some time, what he thinks about, after a couple of weeks, when all of these ill effects are worn off, he says, okay, we'll modify it. No animal shall drink alcohol to an excess. Okay, see, this word excess is very interesting because it is not quantifiable. See, when your government tells you, when your administration tells you, when those in power tell you, do it, but don't overdo it, they haven't told you exactly, haven't given you a quantity, which means it is what it means to be overdoing something. Okay, it's a very clever way of allowing people to get away with whatever they want to, do, but at the same time keeping other people in control. So I can drive for 50 kilometers, okay, and say that nobody should drive in excess. And then, you drive 10 kilometers, and I can stop you and say, no, 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 this is excessive. Okay, there is absolutely no metrics. Okay, yes. Now the last chapter, what happens is we are shown that a number of years have gone by. Okay, and all the many of the animals are dead. Okay, and there is this farmer Jones also has passed away. Okay, Clover is now 14 years old. She is crossed the retirement age, but she hasn't retired. No animal has ever retired ever from the farm. Okay, now all the money that has been generated by animal farm has been used to buy two of the nearby farms from fields from Pilkington. Okay, now another windmill has also been constructed, and it is used for milling corn. All of these things are happening. Okay, animals are getting less food. Okay, but the pigs are getting a lot of food. Okay, now a new writing has appeared on the wall. All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. Okay, now I wanted to tell you that in the middle, Clover sees the pigs walking on two legs. Okay, now remember the earlier tenet that was said: four legs good, two legs bad, right? Now the pigs have made it four legs good, two legs better. Okay, and now see, walking on two legs becomes, for animals, becomes a matter of prestige. Okay, if they can walk on two legs, then they're better than those on four legs. And see, all animals are equal, but some are more equal than the others. Understand? So anyway, Napoleon also does one more thing. Animal Farm, the name has been changed to Manor Farm. See, this is what Benjamin was talking about. See, that nothing changes, everything remains the same. Underneath it all, nature, the basic nature of who we are, never changes. Okay, now Pilkington, Frederick, both of them come to play cards. Okay, with Napoleon, and each accuses the other of cheating, and a loud argument breaks out in that room, and the other animals are looking in through the window, and they can't make out who the pigs are and who the humans are. Understand? So they have all kind of transmogrified into each other. They have mutated into each other, because there's absolutely no difference between these two people. Understand? So here, like I told you, there is this last scene, the iconic last scene of the novel, where Orwell says people believe that I was trying to show that people have interpreted it in different ways. But what I have done essentially is that I wanted to show people that there isn't really much different. Okay, yes. And I was trying to point out the Tehran conference. Understand? The kind of events that have unfolded at the Tehran conference. See, in the Tehran conference, what happened was that, Stalin had put out this news that there is going to be an assassination attempt that was made on the life, that could be made on the lives of Stalin himself, as well as Churchill. Okay, this is because Roosevelt was staying in the American embassy, and Stalin somehow wanted him to stay at the British or the Russian embassy. Okay, so for that he spread this propaganda, and then the Americans advised their president that it is better to go and stay somewhere nearby to these people, because otherwise, if they are killed, actually killed in the process of coming to you, then America will be responsible for the assassination of two leaders. We cannot afford that. Understand? So Animal Farm, through the agency of a fable, through the agency of an allegory, through allegorical presentations, talks about the way that a certain ideology, okay, has disintegrated and come to a point where it has become just like all other totalitarian ideologies. Okay, so it is not just, though, Orwell says it is about the way that, the failure of the Russian Revolution, and the way that, somehow Russian brand of communism has become a byword for socialism all over the world, and how he wanted to break this idea down, how he wanted to destroy that myth. Okay, though this is the intention with which he wrote the novel, down the ages, this book is seen as a creative and an interesting way in which the path that is followed by most ideologies, or the path that most ideologies go down, can be charted. Okay, the idea, the initial need which leads to a rebellion or a revolution, the initial innocent optimism, okay, then the setting down of principles in black and white, okay, the emphasis that is given to the cult of personality, okay, then the tendency to become overarching, to become absolute, to become completely in control, okay, and the eventual slide back of the condition of the people. Understand? So this is what this particular novel, in a very political, in a very interesting way, puts through. Okay, and use of animals is very, very telling here, because, in a way, while most human beings are under the control of other human beings, all over the world, animals are controlled by human beings. Animals are regulated by human beings, even wild animals, because we allow them to stay in reserves. We protect forest lands. We try to conserve species. See, so a man might be, under the thumb of a dictator in some part of the world. But if he has a dog, if he has a cat, if he has a chicken, he controls them. Okay, if he has a rat problem in the house and is trying to eliminate the rat, he is controlling the animal. So all over the world, if you could consider animals as being the symbols of oppression. Okay, so when the animals rise up in rebellion against the humans, okay, it is the principles of equality of society that, socialist theories actually set out to put out there, to propagate. Understand? And, here, through the use of propaganda, through the use of, let's say, national mouthpieces, what is done is that the legend of a leader, okay, the cult of that personality, the fears of the people, fears, the fears of the people, all of these things are manipulated and oriented towards an enemy who cannot be seen. Okay, whether it is Jones, whether it is Snowball, any of these people, okay, it is oriented to point to an enemy who cannot be seen, so that the people do not see the enemy within or between them. Understand? All national rhetorics work on the basis that we are all one, and we have to be one, so as to be able to counter some threat that will come in the future. Okay, this is what happens in Animal Farm also. So it's a perfect allegory for the way that, rhetoric, propaganda, ideology, the cult of personality work in the world today. Okay, and here, what is relevant, particularly relevant here, is the way that propaganda has worked out in over a period of time. Okay, even today, and in the way that today we have social media for that, but in those times it was these national newspapers, party newspapers, and so on. Okay, then it became television. Okay, and these obvious displays of power. So Animal Farm talks about these aspects on an allegorical level, but they resonate on account of the fact that it is not just about the Russian Revolution and the way that the socialist regime captured the basic forms of societal control in Russia. It is not just about that. It is about all of us. It's about our systems of government. Okay, so I am going to stop recording at this point of time.